Hi and welcome. I've created this gentle morning wake-up session for rock climbers. However, anyone could practice this. We'll give some special attention to our wrists, our midline, and our hips in this practice. And I'm going to start facing the long edge of my mat, just being aware that not everyone has a big space where you can kick your leg out to the side. So we'll start like that. And I am going to demo a couple of things at the end of our practice with a couple of foam blocks and a roller. If you don't have those, then I'll also explain how you can do those practices without the props, so don't worry if you don't have them. So let's start facing the long edge of our mat. You can kneel to start or sit cross-legged, and maybe you close your eyes and have a moment where you arrive here on your mat. Maybe you take a longer exhale, a little softer, a little smoother with your breath. And maybe a reframe where often we think, oh, I'm really tight, I've got to fit that stretch session in, or I have to work on my hip mobility, or my body's effed up, I need to do something about it, I need to fix myself. What about if this was also a time, or if this was your time to connect with your body and tune in with your body's needs and offer yourself some compassion? And with that, you can open your eyes and you can take your hands forwards, take your knees back underneath your hips, and let's start by shifting ourselves forwards and back with your arms pretty straight. So you might feel that stretch underneath your wrists. And then you can stay with that, or if you like, taking your right hand and turning your fingers all the way towards your knees. Maybe walk your knees in if that's a little too much pressure for you. And start to shift forwards and back. And an added layer to this might be stretching out through your thumb on that right hand and maybe trying to bend your right elbow a little bit. Breath in. Breath out. You can release that out, either flick or roll through your wrist. Switch sides. So your left hand, you can try taking the fingers towards your knees and starting to shift forwards and back. An added layer could be stretching out through your thumb and trying to bend through your elbow. Maybe the heel of your hand pulls off the floor. Breath in, breath out. You can release that, flick or roll. And this time let's take our right hand and try taking the back of the wrist to the floor, palm facing up, and flicking your fingernails into the floor. And you could try straightening your arm a little more. Elbow could be bent, and you could try spinning the veiny part of your elbow forwards. You don't have to crush your wrist here. You can explore that stretch sensation, maybe moving a little forwards and back. Breath in, breath out. Switching sides, you can flick and roll. Back of the left hand down, flick out through your fingers, going forwards and back. Maybe your elbow's a little bit bent. Maybe you start to flip the veiny part of your elbow forwards. Exploring that stretch sensation on the top of your wrist. There you can flick, roll out. Let's come up onto the knuckles underneath our fingers and try to shift the armpit line forwards. See if you can make a long line from your knuckles to your armpits, and then slowly lower the heel of your hand down. One more time like that, pull up, shift forwards, press into your finger pads and slowly lower. You can sit back on the tops of your feet or your tucked toes for an added stretch through the sole of your foot. And then take your hands forwards and flick out through your fingers for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Out to the sides. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Up above your head. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take your hands together in a prayer fashion and see if you can get a 90 degree from your hand to your elbow for a breath. And maybe you drop your wrists even more, pressing the wrists together and the fingertips together. Breath out. Release that out, shake and roll if you like. Hands to the mat. Let's take our right knee up and out to the side and start to circle through our hip. You can elevate your right hip to make space for that. And circle the other way. Checking out what's going on in your hips. Right foot out to the side, right toes forwards. Shift a little forwards and back with your back toes tucked. You can think about lifting your inner thigh towards the ceiling and making a whole footprint of your right foot on the floor. Let's come up to a kneeling position and take a side bend. Tighten your right kneecap a little bit. Side bend over to your right leg. Maybe some of you go a little further towards your ankle. Checking in what's happening on your side body. Do you feel like back bending or rounding your spine? Or can you think about going straight over to the side? Circle on up, let your left fingertips come to the floor, and then your right arm circles over your ear. Create a long line. You could fall into the heel of your left hand there. You can take your right hand to your hip, elevate your right foot, bend your knee, and make those circles. One way, and then the other. Checking out what's going on in your hip there. If it's available, bring your right knee into your chest, hold your knee, shin, or ankle, and stretch that leg behind you, getting into the front of your right thigh and hip flexor. Let that right leg find the floor, come on up to that one-legged kneeling position, hands to the floor here, back set of toes tucked, and we'll shift back and forwards again. This time, when you're ready, staying in that backwards position, and perhaps you take your elbows to the floor. If it feels safe for you, you can engage your inner right leg, tighten your right kneecap as you stretch the inner line of your right leg. Seeing what's going on in there today. Maybe your breath gets a little softer, a little smoother, a little longer. And if you want to make this a little more intense, you could come up and widen your left knee out to the side. Something I try to notice is if I'm arching my spine a lot here, I'll try to draw a little bit of my abdominal cavity back to my spine, giving my low back some space. If your knee is out to the side, you can come up, bring it in, and then take your right knee towards your right elbow or armpit, crunching the right side of your core a little there, and see how it feels to circle just the lower part of your leg, so your shin. Circle one direction, and then the other. Maybe your knee stays in contact with your arm, again warming up through your hip. Okay, let's let that right knee come underneath the right hip. Arch your spine, and then angry cat your spine. Come into the middle, switching sides. So left knee comes up, elevating your left hip. Make those circles, checking out what's going on in your left hip today. Change direction. Kick your left leg out to the side, toes point forward, back set of toes tucks, and shift forwards and back. You can tighten your kneecap, engage your inner left leg, and try to make a whole footprint on the ground. Coming up when you're ready. Again, engage that left leg, your outer hip, and slide into a side bend towards your left. Maybe making your way a little closer towards your ankle. Maybe straightening your top arm and seeing what's going on in your side. Do you feel like arching or rounding your spine, or can you go straight over to the side? All the way up, we're gonna fall into our right set of fingertips and take our left arm over our ear. Big extended side stretch on the left side. If you like, you can lower to the heel of your hand, press the ground away. Your left hand can come to your hip. You can elevate your left knee, maybe bend it, and make those circles through the left knee. Seeing what's going on in your hip there. If it's available, bring your knee into your chest, hold your knee, shin, or ankle, and stretch your foot back, giving your hip flexor a bit of space. When you're ready, you can let that left leg find the floor. Come all the way up to your kneeling position and shift your hands forwards, going forwards and back again, perhaps engaging that inner side of your left leg. And then staying in the back position, you might take your forearms to the ground. Maybe you try to make a whole footprint with your left foot on the ground. And if you want a little more intensity here, you can take your right knee wider. Maybe tighten your left kneecap and notice if you're really back bending, and you might take your abdominal cavity back, lengthening your hips away from your head. Okay, you can come back up onto your hands, bring your left knee more under you, and then see how it feels to bring your left knee to your elbow or your armpit, and then circle the lower part of your leg, continuing to warm up your hip one way and then the other. Left knee under your hip, arching your spine there, and rounding your spine into an angry cat. Coming to neutral, and let's sit down facing the long edge of our mat with our feet out into a V. You can take your hands behind you, fingertips pointing out to the sides, and let your knees fall one direction, up into the middle, and over to the other direction, into the middle. Let the knees fall to your left, and then see how it feels to sit in this position where you're making kind of a 90-degree angle with your legs, lower to upper leg. Maybe you lean back a bit or take a block and sit up on it under your left hip. Wherever you are there, let's work on a bit of hip mobility. So if you want to make this more powerful, you can take your hands off of the ground and try to be more upright, or you can make it a bit softer by leaning back. So try to bring your right knee up without moving your torso too much. Bring your right knee up, exploring that strength in your hip, and lower it back down. One more time like that. Bring that up. Maybe you put a hand on your outer knee, wherever you are, and resist. And lower it back down. Now, without moving your torso too much, can you use your hip muscles and elevate your right ankle off of the ground? So you might want to do this by crunching your spine over to the side. Try to do it from your hip as best you can, wherever you are. You might lean a little left for this. Take a breath there. Try to be as upright as you can, and then lower your ankle back down and see if your right hip comes a little closer to the ground. And then we're gonna lean back and bring our right foot forwards, cross it in front of our left shin, and start to walk our hips back and lean in to a hip stretch. You could stack your shins if you like and place your elbows on your top shin, or bring your elbows to the ground. And just checking in with your hips. Maybe your breath gets a little longer here. Coming up into the center. Let's see if we can take our right leg back to where it was in that 90-90. Lean back if you like. Bring your legs, knees back up into that V position from your pelvis, and let your knees fall to the right. So you can lean back here. You can make it more powerful by shifting forwards and taking your hands off of the floor. Wherever you are, check out how low your left hip is. You can also sit up on something here. So let's see how it feels to lift our left knee up and out to the side, and then lower it back down. lift it up. Maybe push into the outer knee for some resistance and lower it back down. This next one, could you lighten your left ankle off of the ground, trying not to do that from your side, but more from your hip. It's hard, it's definitely challenging to be more upright in that position. You could do that a couple of times, exploring your outer hip strength, and then release that and see if your left hip comes a little closer to the ground. Let's take that left leg all the way forwards. So we're crossing at our shins or stacking your shins. Walk your sit bones back and lean in. Take a moment here. You could lean a little further forwards. And what if you didn't need to fix yourself? You were just checking in rather with how your hips were doing right now. Let's come on up, and as you're ready, see if you can take that left leg back to where it was. Knees up in that V position with your legs from your pelvis, and then cross at your ankles and turn onto the front edge of your mat here. So if you have blocks, you can take your blocks and point them in a V position like this, and place your hip bones on the blocks so your pubic bone is not on your blocks, and you can take your forearms to the floor here. If you don't have blocks, you can have your abdomen on the floor and do the same thing. The blocks will just give a little bit more space. So bring your belly button a little away from the ground. Like if you're on the ground, it's like there's a strawberry under your belly button and you don't want to squash it. Keep that engagement and then lift your legs off of the ground. So using a little bit of your low back, your glutes, and your inner legs. Widen your legs here and then draw them in together, touching inner ankles if you can. Widen without squishing your strawberry and draw in 2. You might do this with your breath. 3, 4, 5, and then lifting your legs a little bit more. See if you can lift your torso and take your hands behind you. Palms back. If you like, interlocking your hands and squeezing your shoulder blades a little together. See if you can maintain that lift of the strawberry off of the floor, or your belly button off the strawberry. Release your hands to the floor, knees down. Come up and out of that and into a child's form. And then taking your blocks forward. So if you don't have blocks, I'm going to show you that as well. Abdomen on the ground and elbows on the blocks. So if you don't have blocks, your elbows can be on the ground like that. Hands interlocked. It's going to be a little bit simpler without the blocks. Interlock your hands. Walk your hips a little more forwards. Press your knees into the ground, and then think about pressing so strongly into your elbows that your shoulder blades go wide, your collarbones go wide, and your armpits really lift and your low ribs lift. Some of you might be able to lift your pelvis as well, pressing strongly down for 3, 2, 1, and lowering your hips and low ribs down. So I'm going to show you that without the blocks. Elbows down, wide through your collarbones, wide through your shoulder blades. Press down and lift your shoulders off the floor. Maybe lift your ribs, lift your pelvis for 3, 2, 1, and slowly lower down. Let's do it one more time for good measure. You can play with the blocks or not. Try to keep your wrists aligned with your elbows, head in line with your biceps. Press down to widen collarbones, shoulder blades, lift ribs, lift belly onto the knees for 1, 2, 3, and slowly lower back down. Release that out. Take your right arm out to the side, right temple to the floor, and roll your left hip on top of your right. Take a breath there. If you're not feeling much, you can bring your right arm up into a Y. Keep doing that same stretch. If you're not feeling much in the front of your chest, you can also bend your arm so it's like a goalpost arm, also in a 90-degree, and roll over. You could tippy toe your left toes behind you and drag your sit bones towards the backs of your knees. Coming into the center, let's switch side, left arm out to the side, or in a Y, or in a goalpost. Roll over, finding that just right amount of stretch. You could tiptoe your right toes behind you and anchor your sit bones towards the backs of your knees. Into the center, come on up. For the midline of the body, we either can hold a forearm plank, or if you have a foam roller, this will make it a lot more challenging. So the foam roller will go at around your shins, interlocking your hands into a forearm plank and elevate your feet. If you don't have the foam roller, you can hold your forearm plank, shifting forwards and back. So you can drop your hips a little, but lift the back of your ribs to try to find that long line, taking the cavity of your abdomen towards your low back and pressing your inner wrist strongly down. So press down so that your shoulder blades and your collarbones are wide, and you might go forwards and back 5 times. This one is incredibly challenging for me. 2, 3, try to keep pressing down through your inner wrists. 4, 5. Come on forwards. You can pull your knees all the way in and come towards a child's form. Up you come, letting the foam roller go. And bringing yourself back down onto your abdomen, coming into a cobra to stretch through your abdomen. Feel free to circle out through your head. You might repeat that if you found it useful. Or if you have a foam roller, go ahead and go into rolling your quads or your outer hips or your IT bands, whatever your morning routine might be. Keeping in mind that fascia likes a bit of a lighter touch to reorganize the system, so you don't always have to go into pain. Coming up and back into a child's form, hips to heels. And you might go ahead and lie on your back or sit in a meditation. But take a couple moments here to close your practice. and check in with your body. Maybe you can locate any needs that you have that you might be able to work with today. Thank you for being here. I hope this was useful for you. May you have peace.